It's day 2 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and the prosecution's star witness, his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, taking the stand. The disturbing video of Diddy and Cassie in an LA hotel hallway, one of the sparks that really ignited this case. Today, for the first time in 6 years, Cassie coming face to face with Diddy, telling the jury in graphic detail about what they say is the darker side of the rap mogul over the span of their 10-year relationship. Cassie admitting she was young and initially wanted to make him happy by fulfilling his sexual desires, but quickly became reluctant. Ventura says the freak-offs took up so much of her time, it felt like a full-time job. When she didn't cater to Combs' desires, he became violent and abusive, bashing and stomping her head at times. In the courtroom, hearing the explicit details of these sexual escapades, Combs' mother and children back for a second day in a row. Prosecutors argue Combs used power and fame to lead a criminal enterprise for 2 decades to allegedly abuse, threaten, and force women into drug-fueled sex marathons that lasted for days. He strongly denies all of these allegations. If convicted, Combs could face life in prison, a stark contrast to the life of luxury he's known for. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. We'll take you inside the courtroom in just a moment for the emotional testimony, and we'll also take a closer look at Cassie Ventura, the singer and now star witness, on the stand. Let's go to Aaron Katursky.
Also, what his defense strategy is that they are admitting to him being a domestic abuser, but are saying that that is not the same thing as being a sexual abuser, and that was something that he did not do. So they're making this, they're going to attempt to make the differentiation between him being a domestic abuser, but not a sex trafficker, not an abuser of the sexual nature. They're saying that he was a swinger, that Sean Combs was somebody who, yes, he partied, yes, he was physically violent with Cassie Ventura, but he did not engage in any type of forced sexual activities on his victims. He did not do anything of the sex trafficking nature. And in fact, none of his abuse was of the sexual nature.
He was inside the courtroom for all of it, and he joins me now from Lower Manhattan. Aaron, this was the first time that Cassie Ventura and her ex, Sean Combs, have seen each other since 2018. What was that moment like in the court?
Yes, and the only reason that they're owning up to him being a domestic abuser is because of the video in the hotel. So that is playing a major role in the prosecution's case against him. And so they knew that they were going to have to they knew that they couldn't deny the proof that was caught on camera, which it's very rare that people who are in a domestic violence situation have evidence that is that stark. And so that's why the strategy is to say, okay, yeah, he physically abused her. He engaged in domestic violence, but his abuse was never of the sexual kind. Yeah, like, okay.
Courtroom.
When she walked into the room, Sean Combs appeared to look at her, but she, Eva, did not seem to look at him. And during her testimony, I'm not sure she really made eye contact with Sean Combs. She turned occasionally to her husband, Alex Fine, who was seated in the courtroom. She had other members of her family, her attorney there in support. But she recounted such graphic detail, too graphic for us to discuss here now, in such soft-spoken, matter-of-fact tones, describing degrading sexual activity that she said Sean Combs forced her into, starting when she was 22 years old, and as she called herself, naive, too naive, she said, to really understand what was going on or understand the power dynamics in the relationship. Because she said if it turned him on, that's what they did. Her preferences weren't at all considered. And she said she was passed around and objectified by men and with other men she didn't want to be having sex with on Sean Combs's whim, describing how he wanted to set up recording equipment to record these freak-offs. She said it made me...
Also, the reason that they're using the courtroom images is because it is not televised. So, unlike the Depp versus Heard case, and of course, though, there were images from that, but that was because it became just a... It became such a spectacle online and also offline. But that is because there are no cameras or videos. There's no cameras in the courtroom.
I feel insane. She said it was humiliating and disgusting.
Aaron, Cassie shared that she didn't have a whole lot of sexual experience before she met Diddy. She was only 19 when she met them. There's a nearly 2 decades age difference between these two. Talk more about that power dynamic and how their relationship changed over time.
Well, she was 19 and a young singer, and Combs signed her to a 10-album deal with Bad Boy Records, so a long-term deal. And she said, Eva, that she only made 1 album. Otherwise,
right. And so, like, I'm sorry if I'm broken recording, but I think these are things that are really important to understand. So, the reason that I'm trying to, I implore people who are tuning into this case to not be swept away by these salacious details, by being like, oh my God, the baby oil, the freak offs. Is Michael B. Jordan going to testify? Because the things that you need to understand at the core here are things like power dynamics. How did Diddy operate for as long as he did, abusing as many people as he did, and was enabled by, there's a lot of people around him who didn't engage, but they enabled him. Cassie, being as young as she was, new to the industry, was preyed upon by someone like Diddy, and we know that this happens all the time. Please, please, please consider FT's amazing video on Diddy, very educational. Yes, I will probably watch that at some point. This is going to be going on for a long time, so at least 8. They think it's going to be at least 8 weeks, so we will watch that video. Yeah, so I just don't want people to lose sight of what needs to be the focus here, okay, when we're talking about a culture of abusers being enabled, being allowed to harm a lot of people for a long time. The power dynamics that are so often at play in these not just high profile but cases of abuse. Are clips intentionally off? Oh no, hold on a second. Let me turn those back on. Okay. There we go. Those are back on. I've always had an issue with crime reacts. I think it's inherently problematic because you're using someone's horrific experiences to make slop react content. This case being so extreme just makes it more obvious how unethical it is because she went through so many horrific things. That's why there's a difference between actual journalistic reporting and clickbaity slop content. Yeah, and I will say, I do not think every person who is not technically a journalist, but is like doing commentary. I mean, that's what I'm doing now. I think what you have to be aware of, what are your intentions? What are your intentions with how you are approaching a major case like this? And I've talked a lot about the problems that seem to be inherent within the true crime genre, and that there are so many true crime creators now because it is such a massive economy, because people are very drawn to these stories. But there is that line of, are you making this entertainment? Is that your number one priority and your focus? And so therefore, that is going to come through in the way that you are commentating on on a major case. It depends on how the streamer and creators are covering it, if they're highlighting the abhorrent crimes or if they're in it for the content. Right. And one thing that I cover a lot of major sex abuse cases within industries like media and entertainment, because I am trying to draw attention to how deeply rooted these issues are, how power creates power gives the freedom and protection to abusers, which is why when we talk about, oh, it was an open secret, oh, everyone knew, but why did nothing happen? Why was this allowed to go on for as long as it did? And so it's the important things to take away so that we no longer live in a world. We do not have this culture where abusers are protected and abuse victims are silenced. I find it genuinely shocking that people like Candace Owens and Brett Cooper have been getting into covering these kinds of stories and finding brand new audiences. I mean, I've talked about this before too. There's a reason that they're doing that, because they wanted to branch out from the Daily Wire. They did not want to limit themselves to people who are hardcore right-wing viewers. And so by ascribing the label of pop culture, by getting into talking about these types of things, but pushing their reactionary ideology, it has opened up, it has given them, it has allowed them to access a wider audience of people who are not necessarily ideologically explicitly right-wing. So politics through non-political arenas. And of course, non-political in that you are not covering what's coming out of the White House, but absolutely, this is all politics. It's just, and even Brett Cooper has said, the stakes are lower. I can tap into these big topics, these massive stories that a lot of people are interested in. They're interested in learning more about. They want to see what's going on. And so they will then, these are new viewers who I can bring into my audience. They know where the content is and are trying to grow a bigger audience to share the grift with. Right. And I said this before with Brett Cooper specifically. Her first video when she rebranded was a video attacking Blake Lively. And that's because the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation is so massive, has captured a lot of people's attention, and has been ripe for reactionary, right-wing commentators, grifters, etc., to come in and seize on that opportunity. And then it's you watch that video, the next video you'll see is why the Department of Education should be defunded, why we need to be more, why we have to shut the border down, why undocumented immigrants in this country are the reason that crime is so high. And then Candace Owens, from the day that the Me Too movement launched in 2017, she stated that her goal is to dismantle it. So she has positioned women accusers as, as evil, as victimizing men. She is working on a series to publicly exonerate Harvey Weinstein. This has been a stated goal of hers for the last 8 years. And so when she first dipped her toe into the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni situation, she realized, ooh, there's a lot of possibility here. I'm bringing in more people than I ever had when I was at the Daily Wire. And I've heard so many anecdotes of people who are like, yeah, my mom doesn't know who Candace Owens is, but the other day I was talking to her and she's like, do you know this Candace Owens lady? I've been watching a lot of her stuff because I wanted to know more about Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively. Well, you know what Candace Owens' position is? Her position is that this systemic abuse doesn't exist, that these women are liars, that men are victims. Men are victims and they are being punished by a system that is that is too friendly to women. That the system is punishing these men because they are wealthy, because these accusers seek, you know, they have a lot to gain in accusing these powerful men. I've noticed right-wing media leaking into Girly Pop Nation. Yes. And I have been trying to talk about this for a long fucking time. And let me tell you, trying not to crash out in your title is iconic, I fear. I mean, I've been losing my mind, and today was a day where I really felt on the verge of losing my mind. Flunky, thank you so much for the 29 months. I will not dock your pay, but don't be late next time. Gracious Plague, thank you so much for the 33. Gingerbread, thank you for the 32. I have had so many conversations. I'm about to spill a little bit of tea here, okay? I have had multiple conversations with journalists who call because they want to talk about the manosphere, because they want to talk about Hassan Piker's position as a counter to the Joe Rogans, etc. Okay, there are now a million fucking pieces that have been written. They are largely the same. And every time I talk to one of these journalists, and they are always men, I try and talk about this issue that I'm talking about right now, that I've been trying to talk about for a long time. And they're not interested. They are not seeing they're not seeing the connection here. They just want to talk about Joe Rogan. They just want to talk about like guys who work out and love Trump. And then they want to talk about like, oh, well, do you think that Hassan is the left's answer to Joe Rogan? I'm like, man, we're all writing the same shit now, okay? I'm not saying that this has not been an important topic of conversation, especially in the aftermath of the 2024 election. But a lot of journalists are just, they're always behind, right? Like this has been happening for a while. The manosphere is not new. What Hassan's been doing is not new. It's just that they all suddenly learn at once and then they all write the same pieces. And it's like, hey, there's this other thing I'd really like to talk about. I would love to talk about how a lot of women have been popping up in these right-wing spaces. I want to talk about how there are specific genres of content like wellness and beauty and true crime, etc., where largely they are dominated by female content creators and have a huge demographic of female viewers. And we are seeing more and more reactionary ideology pop up in these spaces. What about the girly pops? Right. And anyway, so I just wish that like, I wish this was not being ignored in the way that I feel that it is. Because they only want answers in the form of aesthetics, because saying that real change needs to be made is going to have them lose their access to liberal politicians. Right. Like, how are people not seeing, how are they not making the connection of why someone like Candace Owens has massively ascended since leaving Daily Wire? Why someone like Brett Cooper? Same thing. Okay? They were popular via their position with Daily Wire. They left, they rechanged their focus, and now they are reaching an audience that they never would have been able to reach the size of if they stayed with the Daily Wire. Also, everyone ignores the way swerve content funnels women into the alt-right, since a lot of people on the left agree with them. Right. And before there was a right-wing think tank behind that, we haven't captured enough women. We need to systemically invade their spaces with propaganda too. Yes. So, anywho, lack of critical thinking, outright punishment for critically thinking. It doesn't occur a lot of the times unless there's space and or time. The normal person doesn't think women would be susceptible to that kind of radicalization because they don't understand how it happens. Right. And a lot of women, in the type of content that they seek, it is true crime, okay? And that's a whole problem of its own. You got all these women walking around fearing that they are going to be the victims of a serial killer, not understanding what they are most likely to be victims of, which is not, it's not somebody like, what's his name? The one that they all, Ted Bundy. It's not being the 10th victim of a Ted Bundy. And how, a lot of women too, when they engage with pop culture these days, it feels like it is pop culture that is so twisted up with misogyny. I mean, I have a lot of women friends, and the things that I hear them say so casually, I have to check them and be like, where are you getting your information? Also, I'm going to break this down for you. Because you're not seeing how harmful this is, because you're seeing this as just like a little goss, right? It's just it's not important, but this is affecting everything in your life. Okay, anyway, let's continue.
Freak-offs took up so much of her time that it stifled her music career, but it controlled her financially, she said. So she felt like her livelihood, her career, her life really depended on Sean Combs and keeping him happy. Otherwise, she said she feared what might happen. Now, interestingly, she talked a lot about not wanting him to break up with her. Now, whether that was because she thought he might get violent or because she would lose some of the life that she had acquired, she didn't really say. But we know that the defense is expected to argue that, sure, Sean Combs and Cassie had a toxic, violent relationship, but the defense has called her a strong, adult woman who made a voluntary choice.
Aaron, you were in that courtroom. These details were a lot.
Yes, and these are important things that need to be sensitively approached. Talking about why often victims of abuse don't leave, can't leave, etc. This gets into power dynamics, okay? And we still live in a culture where the expectation, the responsibility is put on the victim of abuse. It is what enables abusers, okay? And so any type of framing of victims of abuse in the, by framing it as, well, why didn't they leave? You know, they were there for a long time, even though this abuse was ongoing, etc. It is what lends itself to very harmful beliefs and stereotypes around abuse and abuse victims.
What was the jury's reaction hearing her testimony?
It's really hard to read the jury. Most of them are pretty stone-faced. There was one woman who did seem to be following along. She would occasionally smirk at the mention of baby oil or lubricant, which was used so frequently that, as Ventura described it, the hotel rooms where these freak-offs occurred were left in complete disarray. There was candle wax and oil everywhere. But most of the jurors sat stone-faced, listening to what amounts to the humiliating recollection of a decade's worth of a woman's sex life.
Aaron, what can we expect to see in court tomorrow?
More of the same. Cassie Ventura ended her testimony today, taking jurors to a moment they've already seen video of, what happened in the Los Angeles hotel in March of 2016. The jury had already seen the video, but they saw it again with Cassie narrating it, saying, "That's me," pointing to herself on video and telling the jury this was the first time,
So someone's sitting here giggling to themselves, right? And it's because of the way that the baby oil and the term freak-offs has become a source of comedy, right? That is what a lot of people seized on, which is why they have treated this like it's a humorous thing. Most people, if you ask them what they know about the Sean Combs case, they'll probably have heard mention of the freak-offs. They'll probably say, didn't he have like 1,000 bottles of baby oil? I mean, that's why the jokes and the taking the seriousness out of something, because the image of 1,000 bottles of baby oil is just so goofy and hilarious. That's the effect that it has, is that people are that's what they focus on. That's what they think about.
And only time she tried to escape a freak-off before Sean Combs declared it over. She said she got hit by Combs, she had a black eye, and she wanted to leave. But when she tried to, as the jury saw in video, he dragged her back.
Aaron Katersky for us there at the courthouse. Aaron, thank you so much. And let's break all of this testimony down and what it means for this case with ABC News legal contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer. You were also in the courtroom. This testimony, I mean, the details of this testimony, from a legal standpoint, what stood out to you?
So from a legal standpoint, there are a few quotes that I want to look at that I think kind of run the gambit of what we're talking about here. We have Cassie Ventura here, and some of her quotes saying here, after the freak off, the room was pretty bad off. The candle wax, the all over the place. And then she described it as having a pungent smell. And she brought us into those rooms in a way that made us think no one wants to be in there. The only way you can be in there is to be compelled. I think that fed into the government's argument of coercion. But we also heard something that I think the defense is going to jump on, where she talked about that she was insanely jealous. And we remember from Tenny Garagos, she said that this case was about love, infidelity, jealousy, and money. And so I think something like this, Sean Combs professing to be a man of many women and Cassie potentially being jealous and maybe starting some of those fights or participating in the fights, that's something the defense is going to jump on.
Mutual abuse. And then, mutual abuse is what they will jump on. And God damn it, this, the mutual abuse bullshit line of defense that was popularized by the Depp Heard trial has done so much damage. Irreparable damage. And now it is something that we see used everywhere, right? This idea that in a domestic violence situation that something like mutual abuse can exist. It cannot. It is not a part of domestic violence. In domestic violence, there is one person who has the power and control. So reacting to abuse does not make mutual abuse.
Of course, this saying that she's super young and naive, people pleaser, getting her personality. I think her testimony really drove home the idea that this was a horrible interaction, that it was a toxic relationship, as Aaron is quoting the defense. But also, I think there's something that both sides will be able to use from her testimony, that she was trafficked, as the government is arguing, but also that this could just be a domestic violence case where the defense might be able to argue not these crimes, other crimes.
Let me explain a little bit further. Okay. Mutual abuse in the mutual abuse in its existence is actually referred to as situational couple violence. And this is mutual low-level violence. This is not domestic violence. So this happens with people who have poor conflict resolution skills, who do not know how to communicate. So let's say that you are talking about that you're trying to buy a car or pick a vacation to go on. And that is a situation that if you are two people who have the inability to communicate over something like buying a car, can result in what domestic violence experts will refer to as situational couple violence. But this is generated by a situation that people can't resolve in some other way. Unlike domestic violence, it is not driven by the need to exert power and control over another person. So it's really important to understand that mutual abuse it's rare, okay? It's used in a way where it makes, because it's used in most cases of abuse to make it seem like mutual abuse is this very common thing. It is a rare form of abuse when we talk about the more common forms of abuse, and it is usually referred to as situational couple violence and is not a part of domestic violence. So it's really important to it's important to make that differentiation there. But the way that mutual abuse is often used is when people are discussing matters that relate to domestic violence. Because in domestic violence, in a case of domestic violence, one partner is aiming to exert their power over the other through a pattern of repeated control and sometimes violence. If the victim in a domestic violence situation responds to the aggressor in either an emotional or a physical way, that is not mutual. Abuse is not shared. Abuse is not shared.
Is guilty of, maybe not guilty of trafficking and racketeering.
She also talked at some length about the control that he had over her and the other people on his staff that helped participate in that. Why do you think that was so important?
All right. So
okay, let me pause again. Let me pause again and say that this is obviously very nuanced. All right, this is very, very nuanced, and there are people who will have there are people who will have their personal anecdotes and experiences. And what I'm trying to say, and I think I'm failing in explaining it, is that mutual abuse, which is something that we see talked about all the time now and is used as an excuse by domestic abusers, is rare. And most of the time, this is not something that actually is occurring in what we consider a case of domestic violence, because of what domestic violence entails and why domestic violence occurs. And the reason that this idea that mutual abuse is always occurring in these cases of domestic violence is because the, let's say, defense of somebody who is facing criminal or civil charges of abuse is seeking to put the blame on the victim, on the survivor. And also because of the attitudes that we have culturally, societally towards abuse, in that we have preconceived notions that somebody who's been abused, it is their fault. That if you say that both people are abusive, it justifies the actions of the abuser. When both people are to blame, then no one is to blame. Violent resistance or self-defense will get called mutual abuse, and that is not mutual abuse. So I think that's what I want the takeaway to be. Okay? I want the takeaway to be that somebody who responds, a victim of domestic violence, of abuse, who responds in a violent way, that cannot be labeled as mutual abuse. There's many domestic violence shelters and help programs discuss the gaslighting term mutual abuse. Yes. That's a good article. Literally, it is used to downplay retaliation to abuse and often gets the abuser off the hook. Mm-hmm.
So I think the smart thing to do, like start off, is talking about Cassie's age. She's 38 years old now. Sean Combs is 55. The age gap was one thing they touched on. The fact that she was his singer and signed onto his label as a singer, and she had done some modeling in the past, and that he had the ability to control whether or not her music got out. We also saw the testimony about who was in his inner circle. We saw her talk about bodyguards and chief of staff. And to Aaron's point, she was very matter-of-fact and soft-spoken when she spoke, but what I saw when she talked about those bodyguards and saw pictures of them, it was almost like she started to tremble in her voice a little. You can see a sense of fear as she recounted who the people were, where if she didn't pick up the phone right away, someone would come and find her. And I think that really colored the idea of this criminal enterprise.
Again, you were in the courtroom today. What was the jury's reaction hearing all of this?
I think as they continue to watch, you saw some people feverishly taking notes in the back, but I think as the testimony continued in, everyone was really leaning in, listening. They were somewhat stoic. I didn't see anyone really like jaw-dropping about some of these allegations. Of course, you saw some people, as we see in the reports, shaking their head as to some of these statements because they were very, very horrible and hard to listen to at times.
At the very beginning of the day, we heard from a male escort that testified that he saw Combs attack Cassie. What stood out to you about his testimony?
Yeah, and so Xavier Donaldson was a defense attorney who continued the cross-examination. And what stood out to me is I think they're still kind of attacking this strategy of attacking the credibility as well as the idea of consent here. And so from there were two things. One, Daniel Phillip.
In the Heard and Depp trial, what was the narrative that was portrayed? So it was that actually Amber Heard was the abuser in the situation. But in the court of public opinion, there were a lot of people who believed that, but then also would go, okay, fine, he was abusive, but she was abusive. Amber Turd. Wow. So clever. So we're never going to be free of this. Just got her. Good one. Good one, man. See, but let me use this as an example, okay? That was a very effective PR move. That was a very effective thing that his legal team did because so many people who know nothing about that case, it's from the trial. Right. Okay. So I'm going to assume that that's you just being like, that was a part of the trial. But what I'm pointing out is that was the thing that stuck out in people's minds. Amber Turd, Amber Turd, Amber Turd. And in this trial, now I'm hoping this will be better because it's not televised live, because you don't have the Asmengolds, etc., who are live streaming the trial. People are, the thing that stands out, the baby oil, the freak offs. Yes, that's about all I remember. And that is why it was so damaging having all of all of these people on the internet weighing in to cover the case, because so many of them, it boiled down to just these memeable moments. Was Amber the retaliator, or was Johnny the retaliator? Do you mean like what the outcome of that was? The outcome of the trial was that Amber Heard was found to have defamed Johnny Depp. That was what this was about. But in the court of public opinion, it was the bulk of what people's opinions was either in the camp of they were mutually abusive, or that Amber was the abuser and Johnny was the victim. Bro, why are you paying attention to this Israel paid fake drama? Bro, go take a rest. Go drink a glass of water. Go take care of yourself, okay? Go take care of yourself. What are we doing here? James, thank you for the 32 months. Okay.
Said that he actually had feelings towards Cassie. And there might have been, again, this issue of jealousy that I think the defense tried to hone in on. But of course, the government came back and talked about just the brutality of Sean Combs' interaction with Cassie, the directing of the sexual encounters, who got paid, how they got paid, and then again, just the brutality of the interaction that he saw with them.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in just a little bit. Cassie Ventura's testimony today detailing graphic allegations of domestic violence, which she says she experienced while dating Sean Combs. Violence that the defense admitted to in opening statements. To talk more about domestic violence, let's bring in criminal defense attorney and ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona, who has handled sex crime cases, and former NYPD sex crimes detective Sarah Mathers, who also notably worked on the Harvey Weinstein investigation. Thank you both so much for joining with us. Bernardo, let's start with you. The defense admitted in opening statements that Combs got violent, but say that doesn't mean he was trafficking people. So does the violence matter here?
The violence absolutely matters here, because it's the violence is what actually quieted Cassie as to not say anything for all those years. Look how long it took her to finally say something. And that's a common issue that you see with domestic violence victims, with sexual assault victims, because it takes them a long time, number one, to realize that they were victimized, and two, to have the courage to come forward and actually to speak to other people about what happened to them. But three, look what happens behind closed doors. You just never know.
Also, I think it is really important to understand that this does not happen without Cassie Ventura filing a civil lawsuit against Sean Combs because of New York City's two major post Me Too pieces of legislation. All right. So there was the New York Adult Survivors Act. That was a law that gave victims of sexual violence a 1-year window. So from November 2022 to November 2023, if you were a victim of sexual violence, no matter when it occurred, you could file a claim. So even if the statute of limitations had lapsed, which for most people, they are well outside the window of that statute, they were able to file a not a criminal suit, but or not criminal charges. It was in the form of a civil suit. And that is why we saw an explosion of these types of lawsuits, which included the one that Cassie filed against Sean Combs. And then two, New York also passed the gender-motivated violence protection law, and that provided a 2-year look-back window for victims of violence that were committed against them because of their gender. So under this statute, several more men and women, in addition to the ones who filed suits because of the New York Adult Survivors Act, filed lawsuits, civil lawsuits against Combs. So all of these civil lawsuits are yet to happen, or I don't know if any, well, besides Cassie's, which was settled within 24 hours. So these are separate from this criminal trial here. Okay. So right now, Combs is on trial for criminal charges. If he is found guilty, he is facing life in prison, potentially, if he is convicted of specifically the racketeering charge. That is the one that carries the heftiest sentence. But without those lawsuits and without specifically Cassie Ventura, without that, it is quite possible that criminal investigation would not have been triggered. Do I personally think he will be found guilty? I hope so. It's possible that he may be found guilty of one of the charges, not of all three. It's possible that he could be found guilty of the charge with the most serious sentence attached to it. It's possible he might have the least, found guilty of the least serious charge. I will say I don't think it looks good. Now the question is what is the jury going to think? And it was pretty much impossible to find people who had not already heard of the case and potentially already formed their opinions. And so, of course, in any case that involves high-profile figures, the judge, the prosecution, the defense, they will implore the jury to make their decision based on the evidence that is presented before them. And the defense is saying that you will not be presented with evidence that ties him, excuse me, sorry, it ties him to these serious charges. You will see evidence that shows that he is a domestic abuser, that he was physically abusive, but you will not see evidence that he engaged in racketeering, in sex trafficking, etc. Deanie, thank you.
What happens behind closed doors. So this violence, her being scared, is all a part of the violence and the crimes that took place here and what the prosecution is moving forward in front of this jury piece by piece.
Sarah, you've investigated a lot of cases. How does violence factor into these types of situations?
Well, I think this shows just what Sean Combs was capable of, and it just shows the toxicity that was surrounding Cassie Ventura in her life. I think being a man of power and having the financial means that he had and having the control over her, I think that all just led into this whole situation where now she has the strength to stand up in court and to speak her mind and state the facts and tell everyone what happened. And she is strong, and she was a victim, and now she's able to, speak up for herself and show the world that she's strong and that she's able to come over this and excel in her life and move on.
Bernardo, we saw text messages between Cassie and Diddy today. The defense has already said they think the messages show the consensual nature of their relationship. I'm curious, though, what's your reaction to those text messages?
So when Cassie was testifying about the text messages, she also put it into context as to why she sent those text messages, what was going on in her mind, that she wanted to satisfy Sean Combs, that she wanted to be a part of this in the sense of that she was scared that if she didn't participate, what would happen to her. These are also common signs of people that are domestic violence victims, that are sexual assault victims that you see. We're ultimately going to see later on during the trial an expert come in and testify as to how and why victims like these react the way they do and are capable to send these texts that may look consensual to other people, but when you break it down mentally, you're able to see that this is a victim, a person that is broken, a person that has been tainted, a person that has been brainwashed as a result of the violence and the control that Sean Combs had over her.
Sarah, Cassie didn't come forward until 2023 with her civil suit, years after this relationship ended. In your experience, why do victims wait to come forward?
Well, you know, every victim.
What is the significance of that case? Depp versus Heard, with these sort of ones, the only stuff I knew about the Depp Heard case was the jokes on social media. Well, I would say there's a parallel, certainly with that point of there being a lot of jokes around this case on social media. Depp versus Heard was an extremely lucrative source of an extremely lucrative avenue for a lot of people in media, for a lot of content creators. It was obsessed over on the internet. A lot of people who were weighing in with very distorted understanding of you know, how power dynamics work, how abuse works, etc. I think, you know, the point I've been repeatedly trying to make as far as these very high profile cases involving abuse is that I worry about people who are seeking their information solely from content creators who are not operating with the sensitivity and ethical guidelines that they should be when covering cases like this, that people look at this as like a reality TV show, that they see it as a source of entertainment, that they that rather than having this conversation and bettering ourselves as a society so that we do not continue to live in this culture that enables abusers, that gets lost because the entertainment factor is too strong. I hate that social media focused on the fact that Diddy might be bi or the baby oil stuff instead of the victims and the insane violence and abuse that they went through. Yes. The Sean Combs having sex with men was what got a lot of people upset because of the homophobia that still exists in our culture. It was normie content. Most people can't sit through a Senate hearing, but will gladly sit and watch a court case. Will gladly sit and watch a court case that their favorite content creator is commenting on in a really inappropriate way. Deanie, thank you for another gifted. Izzy, thank you for the 19
story
months.
is different, and some victims respond to trauma differently. And with this situation, maybe just out of fear, like I said, he had full control over her, full control of her financially, and just based on her reputation, society, the emotional aspects, the psychological aspects that she's had to deal with. So these things take time, and she's doing it now, and she should be proud of herself, and we'll see how this pans out.
Sarah Mathers, Bernarda Villalona, thank you both for being with us. Still ahead, the prosecution versus the defense, the strategy from both sides when it comes to Cassie's testimony.
As a streamer, I'm so sick of chatters making Diddy jokes. Like, please stop. It is not funny.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, it all just turns into like what are the most eye-catching memeable moments.
Live day 2 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. His ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura taking the stand, revealing never before heard details about days-long drug-fueled sexual encounters with prostitutes. Cassie saying if she refused to participate, Combs became violent, and that the freak-offs became a job where there was no space to do anything else but to recover and just try to feel normal again. Our ABC News legal contributors Brian Buckmeyer and Bernardo Villalona are back with us. We're going to have y'all take sides today. Brian, you're the defense. Bernardo, you're the prosecution. Brian, let's start with you. If you were the defense attorney sitting there hearing all of these details, what are you thinking?
If I'm the defense, I'm actually not that worried, because in a case like this, they've already conceded that there is allegations of domestic abuse and violence. And I'm waiting to see the government make the connection.
I just have to say, if I was a streamer, if I was on the internet when Depp vs. Heard was happening, I probably would have quit streaming. I probably would have thrown in the fucking towel. I'm sorry. Hold on. What did he say? Let me see.
Defense attorney sitting there hearing all of these details. What are you thinking?
If I'm the defense, I'm actually not that worried, because in a case like this, they've already conceded that there is allegations of domestic abuse and violence.
I mean, he's saying what I was saying though, which is that the defense, I mean, this is why when someone says, is he gonna be found guilty? I don't know. I hope so. I do hope so. But there's a lot of factors at play here. And frankly, it was the correct move, the smartest move that his defense could make by saying, look, we've all seen the video in the hotel room. Yeah, it's bad. Okay. He was physically abusive towards her. He is not, it's that line of like, he's not perfect. We see this all the time when a powerful figure who is facing serious allegations makes an apology where they're like, look, I've made mistakes. I have hurt people. I am not a perfect person. However, I didn't do those things that I'm being accused of. So of course he denied it. He denied it before it was leaked, but what they are presenting is, yes, you are going to see this video from the hotel. It is one of the biggest pieces of evidence that the prosecution has. But what we are telling you is that you, the jury, must not confuse this physical violence with him also having committed sexual violence, with him having forced people, because what they're saying is that these freak-offs were consensual, okay? They're like, everyone was doing drugs, everyone was partying, these were consensual.
And I'm waiting.
I feel like it's going to be hard for the jury to feel any real sympathy or charitability for him. I mean, yeah, like, again, having a case that involves someone like Sean Combs, that there was so much about it before the trial began, it's likely that the jury members came into it with some type of understanding, some type of opinion, whether it is on the side of Combs or against him. I don't know. I mean, we're just beginning, so we have not yet seen everything that is laid out by both the prosecution and the defense.
To see the government make the connection between this is simply a man and a woman, especially a man, because we're hearing the violence from Sean Combs onto Cassie, just brutally abusing her, hitting her, all the things that we said were indefensible, but we're not seeing the connection of, was this force used to compel her to go across state lines for trafficking? Or was this simply a man who was a voyager who liked to participate in these sexual escapades that we may not agree with, but in the course of that, he used violence. So I'm looking to try to slice this with a scalpel rather than come in with a hammer and just kind of pick the case apart little by little.
Bernardo, how do you think the prosecution did?
And I think this is where our beliefs around abuse, the way that we are still culturally at a place where we do not understand abuse. There are a lot of people who have bought into myths, who believe that somebody who stays in an abusive relationship is not actually being abused. This is where that comes into play. So the defense is going, look, he's not on trial for domestic violence. If he was on trial for domestic violence, then sure, okay? The evidence shows that. But he's on trial for these things. And Cassie was with him for 11 years. You really think that if she couldn't leave, you really think that if she could have left, then she wouldn't have left? Like, you think, like, yeah. So, like, this is where that shit comes into play. It is going to be taking advantage of how we still live in a culture that is hostile to victims of abuse, that is protective of abusers. So the hope is that the jury will see, they will see through this, that maybe they have preconceived notions of what an abuse victim is, of what, etc. And they will find him guilty of the charges that he is facing. That argument at its core just denies abuse. It essentially makes it a one-time thing, and after that blames the victim. Yeah, so that's what this guy at ABC's legal expert, like, he's basically talking about the defense's approach to this. Nodders, thank you so much
today.
For the 5
what
gifted
are they
subs.
trying to do here?
So the prosecution is definitely laying out a picture, a story of the life of Cassie with Sean Combs, and especially the violent nature of it, but then the sexual nature of it. And I think what they're doing is piece by piece, they're laying out all these freak-off moments, and now they're starting to get to the nitty-gritty part, meaning the most extreme ones, the ones that shock the conscience. For example, when she mentioned that Sean Combs would have her participate in these freak-offs when she was on her menstrual cycle. I think that right there shocks the conscience, and the prosecution did a great job in ending with that line of questioning to show the jury that, look, this is not just domestic violence, this is not just people having consensual sex, this is the type that no one will want to engage in.
And Brian, the defense has admitted that Combs had non-traditional sexual preferences. Cassie at one point was on the stand flipping through a binder of escorts that they used. We
God,
can't
I hate
even
that term
say
so
out
much.
loud some of the things that occurred on this show. Do you think the defense can really convince this jury that Cassie and these other alleged victims wanted this?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that you can take any of these allegations and say, of course Cassie wanted to do, and again, go and read it, because some of the things we're not allowed to repeat, but the brutality, the coercion, the arguments, the slapping, the dehumanization of what allegedly happened to her, I don't think anyone's going to turn around and say, well, that's just abnormal sexual encounters. But I think the defense can sidestep it and say, yes, that's a crime. You know what we call that? Rape, abuse, sexual assault. Look at the indictment and see if any of those are listed in the indictment. They're not.
Yeah, they're using the term freak-offs because that's what they were known as. Like, that's what Diddy and the people around him called them. That's why they keep saying it. I don't know, man. It's like, I wish that term would go away. What's the legal term? I mean, I don't know if the reason that like the news is using that word rather than non-consensual trafficking parties, drug-fueled orgies that were non-consensual. I believe they're also using the term in the trial. Yeah, I think I think it's the fact that so many people have just made jokes out of it that it's like hard to hear that term over, and it's just a ridiculous sounding term. It's like insane. It's just fucking crazy.
And I think the defense is going to try to sidestep them and say, where's the trafficking? Where were these allegations used to traffic her? Where's the criminal enterprise, and not just an inner circle or an organization of Sean Combs to help facilitate him getting from point A to point B and doing the things that he likes, even though they're state crimes and not federal crimes. So I think they're going to try to sidestep it and argue somewhere else.
Bernard, I have to ask you about these details. The prosecutor is literally asking her about every little thing, down to what these rooms looked and smelled like after these freak-offs, the number of baby oil bottles used each time. Why do you think these details matter here?
So, Eva, the devil is in the details. When you're determining credibility, when you're determining believability, you want the witness to try to give you as much details as possible to determine whether that person is telling the truth. So that's why the prosecution is heavily focusing on these details, because in the end, this case rises and falls on the testimony of Cassie Ventura. And in order for the jury to find her credible and believable, they have to look at her testimony, as well as her demeanor, as well as anything that corroborates her testimony, and evaluate all of that to determine, in fact, whether Sean Combs is guilty of these crimes. So the devil's in the details, so they have to get it out.
Brian, as a defense attorney, how do you handle...
I think also, look, I'm not a prosecutor, and I'm certainly not a prosecutor on this case, but perhaps because they know that conjures up a very strong image, because that's the thing, that one of the parts that the public kind of lasered in on, and potentially that will cause the jury to feel such disgust that it will affect their viewing Sean Combs as a monster. You know? This has been very informative. Thank you, Caroline. You're welcome.
Go across with
thank you,
a witness like Cassie without taking off the jury?
Personally, I don't do it. I think I would first hire someone like Bernardo Villalona, and I think that defense is doing something very similar to that. One of the women attorneys are going to cross-examine Cassie Ventura for a number of reasons. One, this is a woman making allegations of sexual assault on that of a man, and two, she is pregnant. The optics of that would look horrible if someone like me does this. But I think the other aspect of it, from a technical standpoint, very careful. Don't raise your voice. Don't get into an argument. Be as soft-spoken and careful as her, but be deliberate in your words and trying to say, you said this one day, and now you're saying this another day. So which one is it? Don't get into a battle with her, because you're not going to look good doing so.
Brian Buckmeyer, Bernardo Villalona, thank you both for being with us. Coming up, who is Cassie Ventura? A closer look at her time as an emerging star in the spotlight. Welcome back. Cassie Ventura is the star witness in this case against Sean Diddy Combs. But before all this, she once shined as an up-and-coming singer who had a recording contract with Diddy's label, Bad Boy Records. Tonight, a look at Cassie, who she was.
This will sadly be questioned throughout this entire trial. They will ask why Cassie did not come forward earlier. Yep, there are a multitude of reasons, one being intimidation. This is a reminder for everyone that you can come out and talk about your abuse on your own time if you feel comfortable talking about it. Victims need to be able to process everything first before they can fully explain everything that happened. Even then, there's still a lot of trauma that they have to relieve. Yes, they are going to try and take advantage of the harmful belief that if you are a victim of abuse, then you say something in that moment, and that you do not stick in, you do not stay in an abusive relationship. So it's going to get very nasty. It's going to be very gross. Like, the defense has already been gross, but it is going to, they're going to try everything. They're going to try and use all of these, harmful beliefs regarding abuse, the nature of abuse, to their advantage. So yeah, it's going to be 8 weeks of a lot of just a lot of really horrible A lot of horrible things being said, being argued, and it's why I'm like, please, anybody who's covering this, please do not contribute to the spectacle. Please be as informative as possible in a way that is contributing to contributing to the conversation around the truth of what it means to be a victim of abuse and dispelling these harmful notions. Please. About Tree Fitty, thank you. Baby Matcha Latte, thank you so much.
And is. For that, we turn to our Kelly Carter, who covers entertainment and pop culture for us. Kelly, take us back to 2006 when her first album was released.
Please do not further sensationalize a trial that is already, by its nature of involving one of the most famous people in the entertainment industry, already sensational.
Cassie was just starting to make a name for herself. Who was Cassie Ventura?
Yeah, you know, let's go back even a little bit further to really put her into context, because in 2004, you have Ciara dropping her debut album. In 2005, Rihanna drops her debut album. 2006, Cassie comes around and drops her debut album, and really the landscape was very ripe for R&B pop princesses to kind of take over, and it looked as if she was going to fit quite nicely along what we were hearing on the radio and what we were seeing in music videos. She was discovered by Ryan Leslie, who is a songwriter who has written hits for people like Beyonce, Britney Spears, and of course Sean Combs, and it seemed as if all of the ingredients were there for her to fit quite nicely in this scope of the R&B music scene from young women.
So it sounds like she was such a promising young start. What happened here?
You know, what happened is we kept waiting for more music to come. You know, when that first album came out, it lived on the top 20 for a couple of weeks, but then it was like nothing. You know, what you've been hearing a lot in today's testimony is that she signed this 10-album deal with Bad Boy Records, but only one album came out. And for the longest time, people kept waiting to hear more, see more, what was going to become of her, because we saw her on red carpets, right? And then we had to wait about 6 years after that debut album from her dropped to get her on a Nicki Minaj track. And I thought maybe that was going to, you know, bring some new music from her. We kept hearing Sean talk about how she was constantly in the studios working with producers, but we really weren't hearing any new music and certainly no new albums.
Cassie, as we have been able to see, is very pregnant right now, about to have her third baby. What more do we know about her life now?
It seems very quiet, far more quieter than it was when, of course.
Diddy is reportedly reading the Bible in court during his sex trafficking trial. Oh, that's a page out of Jonathan Major's book. This is what I mean when I'm talking about the playbook, okay? Where, make no mistake, that people who are on trial and their very expensive legal teams, they are taking a page out of what worked for, for other people who were facing charges of a similar nature. Cramming for the test. Yeah. Oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to paint you as a God-fearing man, as a holy man, where you are not perfect. You did sinful things, not the things that they're accusing you of, that they're charging you with, but you are on a path of righteousness. And doesn't everyone deserve a second chance? That, yeah, I'm reformed now. And I did some bad things, not the things that they're saying that I did, but I'm on the path of holy redemption. Do you answer questions? It depends. What kind of questions they are.
Of course, she was with Sean, because we're seeing, as we keep rolling, a lot of red carpet footage, a lot of event footage. It's a quieter life, and it seems very sweet. He is someone who often makes a lot of proclamations on social media.
Yeah, what's next? Give him an award for perseverance. Don't count it out.
Instagram about how he wishes the days were longer so that he could have more time to spend with his sweet wife, who is the bestest, in his words, the bestest mama that you know it could ever be, and they're about to have their third baby. So it's quiet and obviously much more regulated.
Kelly Carter, thank you as always for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for streaming with us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus.
Okay, all right. I've got some other things I want to take a look at, so I think that's gonna wrap the coverage from today. I don't think this is necessarily something I'm gonna be covering every day. I will be I'll be tuning in, and I want to watch the FD video at a certain point.